Welcome to Unit Design 101, where we break down the overall factors that make units useful in Fire Emblem and beyond. Whether you're a romhack creator or merely interested in overall design, this resource is for you. This week we're talking about Armor Knights, the reason defense is valued at a premium, and the true value of movement and versatility. Of all the units in Fire Emblem, none wear their identity on their sleeve quite as clearly as the Armor Knight. High defense, solid strength, low speed, resistance, and mobility. Enemy armors are often set to block gates, thrones, bridges, and other points of importance. On the player side of things, Armor Knights are usually lambasted for their weaknesses, particularly in speed and mobility, far more than praising their benefits. There are multiple reasons for this, but chief among them are map design and the design of the defense stat. Briefly touching on the map design side of things, Armor Knights are generally disincentivized because the majority of Fire Emblem maps put the player on the offense. Choke points are occasionally important to hold while the rest of your army moves forward, and defend maps flip this aggressive posture somewhat, but in general, the average experience of an Armor Knight is slowly falling behind your army unless you deliberately let them set the pace, or the enemies you face are so strong that you can't clear with your most mobile forces at full distance. We'll come back to mobility in just a minute, but first I wanted to talk about the defense stat. Supposedly an Armor Knight's biggest strength, defense is one of Fire Emblem's most unique core design aspects. A linear subtraction of damage taken in a low numbers game is incredibly powerful, such that many tactics games reserve any form of direct damage reduction solely to specialized units or equipment. Viewing Fire Emblem's Armor Knight in this way, in my opinion, is a mistake. This is because defense is not a feature limited to Armor Knights. All units have defense and can gain more as they level up. An Armor Knight's base defense is typically higher than other units relative to their joined chapter and level, but the defense growth of an Armor Knight is typically fairly average, oftentimes even behind the defense growth of other unit types. Going back to the original FE1, for instance, the highest defense growth of the game at 50% was shared between two units, Board and Barst, Axe Fighters. Drog, or Doga, the iconic choker of points, has a base defense growth of only 10%. And yes, growths don't tell the whole story, but I feel like it's emblematic of two key points. First, Armor Knights have their most significant advantage in bulk in the early stages of the game before unit growths have a chance to add up. And second, that Kaga's initial design was very insistent on not allowing units to cap defense too early. Defense is a compounding stat. The more you have, the more valuable every additional point is. A 30 hit point unit taking 9 damage per hit will die in 4 hits. Give them 3 points of defense and they die in 5 hits. Give them 3 more, and they die in 10, and after 3 more, they won't take any damage at all. An Armor Knight gaining a few extra points in defense in the early game would quickly become a literally unkillable unit, so it is in the best interest of the game to prevent that. Why? Well, high defense units slow the game down and limit how many real threats a player faces. Most game designers would rather create a 15-minute level where the player is having to constantly avoid danger, than a 30-minute level where the player is never in any danger at all. Playing with invincible Armor Knights can be satisfying for a time, but if you have a unit who is never in any danger, then nothing's stopping you from soloing the game with that unit, trivializing the game's potential difficulty and making all other strategic decisions unnecessary or irrelevant. For an example of this in action, consider Wolf and Sedgar in the DS version of Shadow Dragon. When reclassed to General, these units' defense growths become so incredibly high that they're practically guaranteed to cap defense. With a bit of dedication to an early grind setup, you can easily create 2 units that take basically no damage from enemy physical units until endgame, so much so that they can trivialize the entire game even on hard 5 difficulty. This is why defense usually comes at such a high cost, namely in stats that provide very notable weaknesses: speed, resistance, and mobility. Speed acts as both an offensive and defensive tool, and lacking it means a unit like an Armor Knight will take twice as much damage and deal half as much than they otherwise would from every encounter. Add in low resistance, and mages become incredibly potent counters to Armor Knights, bypassing their high defense entirely and doing more damage against armors on average than against most other unit types. Low mobility, though, is the real sticking point for most players. Videos have been made arguing about whether giving Armor Knights extra mobility would fix them, but while that's an interesting argument to make, we do need to talk about what mobility really does for a unit in Fire Emblem. Mobility at its most basic determines how far a unit can move. In a straight race across an open field, a unit with 8 mobility will outpace a unit with 4 by double every turn. But Fire Emblem rarely has open field with no enemies to run around in. In this case, mobility could be better understood as placement versatility. A unit with 8 mobility has a longer attack range than a unit with 4, and even if that unit has to stop once they attack, they can use that mobility next turn to attack further in, retreat farther away, or so on. A unit with high mobility does not have to commit to any single direction as much as a unit with low mobility does. A unit who has higher mobility than their opponents can run away. A unit with less mobility has to fight, whether they start getting overwhelmed or not. An Armor Knight's low mobility is far less about falling behind the rest of your army, though that is still meaningful because of the high number of offensive-focused maps in Fire Emblem, and far more about becoming committed to one particular area of the map. Arden can pick up the pursuit ring, but he probably won't make it back in time to fight at the next castle. Doga will choke this point, but he won't be able to get to that other point in time to block the enemies there as well. So, with that overview of the issues that most Armor Knights face out of the way, how have some managed to push out of obscurity and into the limelight? Fire Emblem 7's Oswin is just far stronger at base than most other armors are. In a game where most of your other units are struggling to survive taking multiple hits at base, Oswin steps in to tank for however long you need him to, and with a large number of flanking reinforcements in most chapters, there will usually be something for him to fight even once your more mobile units come online and race ahead. In Radiant Dawn, Toronio and Gatry stand apart through their stats. Having high stats across the board, including in areas armors normally lack such as speed and resistance, makes fielding them feel far less punishing. Though they still struggle to travel where they're most needed, they feel powerful and impactful wherever they end up. In Fate's Conquest, Effie is often considered one of the best Armor Knights because her job as a high durability tank is actually valuable, and she does it well. High strength and defense make her stand out because of the relatively low durability of most other units, and the late game addition of Wary Fighter can eliminate the issue of doubling altogether. Engage tried a different tactic for armor units that seemed to work well on first play, at least until the meta was figured out. By eliminating break as a concern, Armor Knights like Louis could fight multiple foes with mixed weapon types on enemy phase while still dealing some damage back. On higher difficulties, Armor Knights tended to be paradoxically less useful in Engage thanks to rampant enemy stat scaling, smarter AI that ignores units that take no damage, and the prevalence of backup units for chain attacks, but the concept of making armors enemy phase specialists was a step in an interesting direction. So, what does that mean for Armor Knights? First, defense is incredibly game warping if a unit can get enough of it. Second, mobility for armors is all about commitment more than raw travel. Third, armors are defined by their weaknesses because their strengths aren't unique. And fourth, carving out a niche for armors may involve letting them break the normal rules of the game. I hope you enjoyed this look at Armor Knights. Do you like using these slow tanks of the battlefield, or does the lacking mobility and vulnerability to mages put you off entirely? Do you wish I talked more about Great Knights? Let me know in the comments below or on Discord. A big thank you to everyone who helped this channel reach 3,000 subscribers. I never expected to get this far. And last but not least, a huge shout out to channel members C2 Piccoli, Enigmatic Mr. L, The Big Herman 007, Bro Duderman, NKO Rico, Kumi, and Miss Mesmerism for supporting the channel at Lagoosguard tier. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day. This is Mythral Zenith signing out.